ourselves in the stressful situations for many months. I would like to get you acquainted with Ken Carswell, the expert of the WHO and the co-author of the book Self-Help Plus. We will be talking about how to teach Ukrainians to manage the stress. Ken, the floor is yours to inform us about the course in general, those who have already undergone the studies, and people who are willing to take part in that. What is the chance of getting involved in this project?
My name is Ken Carswell. I'm a clinical psychologist by background, and I'm from the Department of Mental Health and Substance Use at the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva. So I lead our work there on digital innovation and what we call scalable psychological interventions. And we've spent a number of years developing different packages that are evidence-based and that may support people in severe adversity and humanitarian conflicts and situations. So on a personal level, I would firstly like to say that I feel very grateful and privileged to have the opportunity to support Ukraine and the National Programme of Mental Health and Psychosocial Support that was initiated by the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska. I think it's quite remarkable to have this level of dedication and support from so high up in the government, as has been shown by the initiative. And it's this level of support that's really needed in order to make a difference. So to give you some background to the work that we're doing and why I'm here, one aspect of WHO's work in mental health is the development of these evidence-based, manualized psychological interventions. These are briefer forms of what you might receive if you go to see a psychologist. They can be delivered by both non-specialists, so these are people without any formal training in mental health, as well as by specialists, such as psychologists. These approaches have been used in many countries, including in high-income settings. Now, the packages that we at WHO and that others have developed have been tested in what we see as state-of-the-art, large research trials in various settings, and they're now being implemented in a number of high, middle, and low-income countries around the world. Now, a key part of this work is to use innovative approaches such as smartphone apps, websites, books, and other self-help materials that may help to both prevent and treat common mental disorders and stress. The WHO Country Office here in Ukraine and other key actors are providing extensive support across the continuum of mental health. Efforts were underway before the conflict, but have intensified as a result of it. The First Lady initiative aims to provide much-needed mental health and psychosocial support to the Ukrainian population during this very difficult time. It is aiming to help people overcome stress related to war and the consequences of experienced traumatic events and prevent the development of mental disorders. The development and implementation of the programme is coordinated by the Ministry of Health in Ukraine in close cooperation with Ukrainian and foreign specialists. Can we start the slides, please? Thank you. Great. My work here has involved supporting the WHO Country Office to hold a workshop on scalable psychological interventions and a step-by-step approach to their implementation. And here on the screen you can see an example of one of these interventions, which I'll talk about more in just a minute. Now, what we mean by scalable is brief, evidence-based interventions that can be delivered by non-specialists and specialists and use these innovative approaches. They can help people with problems that are both mild, moderate, and more severe problems like depression, anxiety. So they can help people across the spectrum of common mental disorders and problems. Now, why we do these, or why we use these interventions, is that globally we'll never have enough specialists to support in any country, so innovative approaches are needed. During the workshop that we ran here, about 25 participants, including representatives of the Project Office of the Ministry of Health, other ministries and agencies from state and non-state sectors, learnt about large-scale psychological interventions of WHO and other partners, as well as how to organise and provide these psychological interventions based on examples from other countries. Participants also developed initial plans for the organisation of psychological support for Ukraine across various sectors, including health, social protection, education, security and defence. And I have to say it was an inspiring meeting because we made real progress in developing plans and starting off the implementation of stress management and other initiatives in Ukraine. Okay, so after the workshop, we had a 4-day event where about 28 participants completed a training of trainers on an intervention we have developed at WHO called Self-Help Plus. And I believe this is what we can see on the screen now. Self-Help Plus is an innovative 5-session course that uses a self-help book and pre-recorded audios for the delivery of evidence-based stress management techniques to large groups of people. And it's supported by a trained non-specialist facilitator. It aims to help people affected by adversity to learn how to manage extreme stress caused by conflict and other problems. Now, I've led the development of Self-Help Plus for many years, and it has been shown in 3 large-scale research trials with populations affected by conflict, displacement, and other adversity. It's been shown to reduce psychological distress and problems such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD, and it's also been shown to improve functioning and can prevent mental disorders. So in our training, we trained trainers who will further disseminate the stress management program across the country through the training of other facilitators for local use. So this is the first time that we have scaled Self-Help Plus to such a degree. And it's through the efforts of the First Lady Initiative, the Ministry of Health, WHO, and other partners. It's our aim to make these evidence-based stress management approaches widely available. And it's an important initiative because the 5 skills provided in Self-Help Plus are simple. They can be used in just a few minutes every day. But while simple, they can also have very big impacts. So while this is not a solution on its own, because the causes of stress are the war, displacement, and other issues, it can help people to build the resilience and the skills to help manage stress and support each other through this very terrible time. And I know there's already a huge amount of interest across Ukraine in these trainings. Now, something else I just want to briefly talk about is that in addition to Self-Help Plus, WHO has also supported the adaptation of one element of Self-Help Plus, which is a book, to a web-based platform. And let me try and show you this now. Here we go. So here you go. On the slide you can see we have the book, but we have also just adapted this into a web-based platform which is being hosted by the VU University in Amsterdam. And today we are pleased to announce that a beta version of this is now live and accessible in Ukrainian. And it can be accessed by going to the web link that you can see there. We know that such online interventions can be beneficial, particularly when provided with brief motivation and support from a trained non-specialist helper. The availability of DWM, doing what matters in times of stress, as a web platform may further increase dissemination alongside the book version. And the book version has already been used in many settings in Ukraine for the past few years. But this is, however, only the first part of plans to support the mental health and psychosocial well-being of people in Ukraine. In the workshop, we also developed plans for what we call stepped care. Stepped care is an approach that's used in the UK and many other countries where someone is provided with a lower resource intervention, so something like Self-Help Plus, before being stepped up and provided a more intensive, perhaps in-person delivered intervention should their problems persist after the first step. Stepped care is an evidence-based and effective way of providing support that ensures efficient use of resources and makes sure that people receive the help that they need. It involves both trained and supervised non-specialists as well as specialists such as psychologists and other mental health professionals. In addition, WHO is supporting the First Lady's initiative to ensure that people have access to evidence-based mental health care across the continuum of problems. This includes efforts to continue with the establishment and availability of support through community mental health teams and capacity building primary healthcare workers to respond to mental health needs. The aim is to build capacity in Ukraine to ensure that the mental health support is available to all during the war and afterwards. Now, I've also been asked to say a little bit about mental health in crisis situations more broadly and why self-help might be the basis of that. So I'll just do this for a couple more minutes. So recently the WHO published the World Mental Health Report, which was a landmark report designed to inspire and inform better mental health for all. In there, we cover issues related to mental health in humanitarian emergencies and forced displacement. Now, we know that conflict and war and displacement has a range of mental health impacts, and that addressing these is actually an important aspect of recovery. People with severe mental health conditions are extremely vulnerable during and after emergencies, and they may need support to access the help that's needed. Anybody with a mental health condition is at increased risk of human rights violations during humanitarian emergencies. Almost all people affected by emergencies and affected by conflict will experience psychological distress. For most people, this improves over time, but for others, the impacts of mental health can endure. We know that 1 in 5 people living in settings affected by conflict in the previous 10 years are estimated to have a mental disorder. First responders, such as emergency care providers and relief workers, are at particular risk of mental health problems, both in the short and long term, while various stresses can affect the mental health and well-being of people who are forcibly displaced before and during their flight. This is why the First Lady's initiative and the work of WHO and other partners is so important, because the stress management tools are a critical part of the response, as they can provide everybody across the country with evidence-based and effective tools to help support their mental health. Self-Help Plus has been shown to reduce distress and prevent mental disorders, and the guided self-help aspect allows it to be delivered to many people. And we look forward to, we've been working in the workshops with the different ministries across the different sectors to start rolling this out, which is very exciting. So I would like to end by thanking the First Lady of Ukraine for the initiative of the National Programme of Mental Health and Psychosocial Support, as well as the Ministry of Health, the WHO Country Office, and representatives of other ministries and agencies from state and non-state sectors for their support in developing and implementing the programme. I would also like to thank the USAID Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance and the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation for the financial support that has made this work possible. It's an important step in efforts to support the mental health of the Ukrainian population. Thank you for your time.
Пане Кен, ви сказали про те, що
You mentioned that 1 in 5 persons, including Ukrainians, you mentioned that every 5th person, including Ukrainians, is in need of psychological help in one way or another and of different degree. What is your assessment of the impact in general for society under the stress of the ongoing war?
The society of the ongoing war are big. We know that it leads to psychological distress. We know that mental health disorders can increase, and this can happen, as I was saying, across first responders, across people exposed particularly to traumatic events within the military, across the whole population. So we see an increase in stress during these times. As I said before, we also sort of see that for most people, they will naturally, people are very resilient. So people will be able to cope with the stress, look after themselves, look after each other. Things like the Self-Help Plus program can help people to support both themselves and other people. So the idea would be that we help those people who can support themselves and support others, whilst also putting in place more formal support and support from specialists for people who may have problems which last a bit longer, where they might have what we call impaired functioning. They might find it difficult to be doing the things that they usually do every day, like look after themselves or look after others. They might be feeling like it's not worth living anymore. And these problems can also increase during war situations, and it's important that people across the whole spectrum receive support receive the support that they need.
Розкажіть про якісь
Will you tell us about the basic marks that tell a person that there are problems that need to be attended to and you should start working on those consequences?
I think during times of adversity, conflict, war, displacement, what we call acute stress, so trouble with sleeping, changes in mood, anxiety, depression, these are all very common and understandable reactions to incredibly difficult circumstances. So they would be some of the aspects that I would expect would be there for many people, if not everybody. But I guess, and I guess all of these aspects there are ways to get support with these. So there's ways to get support with the more acute stress aspects. And then other sort of signals, signs, things that might show that people are not being able to cope so well, and they might benefit from additional support. This might be when those problems are a bit more severe. So for example, somebody might be finding it difficult to function, so they might not be doing their normal things like working, looking after people, looking after themselves. They might isolate themselves, stop seeing other people. They might have a lot of trouble sleeping, and that might be impacting on their daily routines. They might be starting to use drugs or alcohol as a way of coping, to try and sort of numb the stress and reduce the stress, something we know that doesn't help. And people may start feeling like, well, life isn't worth living anymore. They might feel very desperate, hopeless. And then in more severe cases, we might see people start having problems such as feeling very suspicious or hearing or seeing things that are not there. So that's in more severe end of mental health problems. So I think those issues and the issues I've mentioned there, I think if people are experiencing things like this, then it's very good to seek support.
Можливо, зможете дати кілька порад тим, хто
Perhaps you would give us a couple of advice. What would be your personal basic advice how to start working on those symptoms on your own?
Before I say that, one other thing I'd like to mention about seeking support is that it is okay. Obviously, I think mental health is one area where people feel very stigmatized, and they might feel ashamed for feeling a certain way or for having some of the problems that I mentioned before. But it's okay. They're understandable reactions to things, and the help is there and the help is available. And just like with physical problems, there's no shame or stigma involved in it. So I really would encourage people to reach out for support with these things. And I think that's one of the first steps in self-care is looking after yourself and looking after others, talking to other people, supporting each other. We know that social support is a very important factor in mental health and well-being. Other tips or suggestions, one would be to have a look at the book. There's some great stress management techniques within there, and now it's very widely available now that it's online. But aside from that, keeping up routines, keeping up exercise, trying to do things that you might enjoy. Very difficult in a situation like this, but perhaps there's small moments, small things that might give you some joy, give you some relief, you know, bring back the community, the feeling of community. Trying to keep, I suppose, as regular, routine, sleep, eating as possible. All of these sort of basic, you know, looking after our physical health, looks after our mental health, and vice versa. Again, not using drugs or alcohol as a way of coping, trying to be aware just overall of your health and just trying to be aware of your overall level of stress. And reaching out to a friend, trusted person, a professional, if you're finding it hard and if you need it, or if you feel you need it.
Шановні колеги, ваше питання.
Questions from the floor, please. Would you specify what strata of categories and professions are in special need of psychological aid here in Ukraine?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good question. We know that anybody who is exposed to war, conflict, and similar events. So I think we'll be talking here about first responders, the healthcare workers, police, the military, anybody who is, you know, obviously within across a population, many different people are affected, and so you can't really sort of say it's just this population, because even within that population there'll be diversity in terms of effects. But generally we find that it's people who are closer to the conflict, closer to some very terrible events that might be sort of most affected, or people who are under a lot of stress. And I imagine that would be the groups that I've just sort of mentioned there. And potentially many others. I mean, even down to, you know, there'll be people, social protection people who are helping the massive amount of internally displaced people within Ukraine, who will probably be under a lot of stress. So I think we can see it as any population, any group that is under a lot of stress right now. Yeah.
Ваш досвід роботи.
Your expertise in working in other countries, what does it tell you? How much time will Ukraine need to overcome the consequences of war? What's your take on this?
It's a difficult question to answer definitively, because I would say that every situation is different, every country is different. You know, it depends how long does a war go on for, what's the level of damage across the country, and not just physical damage, but damage to social bonds, to communities, to the economy, all of these aspects. So it's difficult to definitively answer. But we do know that these problems may persist over time. Like I mentioned, around 10, this is a sort of big research study looking at everything across the world, lots of different research studies put together. Studies like that show it is about, you know, 1 in 5, about 10 years later. But that also shows that the majority of the population are recovering. And I think that within Ukraine, the level of community, of social support, of determination that I've seen, the support that people are providing to each other, and I've only been here a very short amount of time, but I've really noticed that. Those are some of the things that will help to hopefully reduce some of the impacts over time. And certainly the initiatives, the mental health initiatives and the initiative of the First Lady that I mentioned earlier, it's initiatives like this that will help a country to come back. We do know from previous emergencies, that's included wars, natural disasters, conflicts, we do know from them that it is possible to build back better mental health systems. So there's many examples of countries that have been badly affected by wars. being able to emerge from it with a much stronger mental health system than it was when they went into it. Now Ukraine has the benefit of having many fantastic professionals, mental health professionals, social care professionals, psychologists and similar across the spectrum of agencies and things. So there's a lot of capacity and resource there. And with the with the First Lady's initiative and bringing these things together, I would hope that there's an opportunity to really scale up this support. I mean, certainly this is what's already happening with Self Help Plus. We've been here, we've done the initial training of trainers. Already I understand there are numerous requests coming in from all different agencies, all different areas for this support. So if we can put some of this stuff in place now, hopefully we can then reduce the impacts of mental health over the long term. But it's going to take sustained funding and sustained commitment across the whole spectrum of actors.
Я дякую вам.
Let me thank you. Thank you for the fact that you are here, that you are with us, that you are helping Ukrainians to cope with such life-threatening situation that we are facing now. Let me remind you that we've been talking to Ken Carswell, the expert of the WHO and the co-author of the Self Plus book and the course. Our next briefing will take place at 12 o'clock. It will be hosted by the Language Commissioner, the Commissioner for the Support of the Ukrainian Language. Will be talking about a new legislation on the state language and the punishment for breaching such rules. Thank you very much.